Good evening. Tonight we're going to take a look at an issue I'm having with an older project that we're using quite regularly. The project is called Azure AD Kubernetes API proxy, and it's a small reverse proxy that's set up in the Kubernetes clusters, AKS, EKS, on-prem, wherever you want, and it handles how to get the user groups. One thing we have with this tool is a small CLI that is able to create a menu where you can discover the different clusters. We have a small GIF here that shows it, and the discovery is based on Azure AD applications. In this case, we have an Azure AD application here, and we have a tag where the tag says azad-kube-proxy, and that will help us discover the actual cluster based on the address we can see here. An issue we're seeing with this is that when we run this discovery of the applications, if the user doesn't have a directory reader, we're not able to actually use the discovery. So this is the discover command, and the user I'm logged in as doesn't have the directory reader permissions. If we go to Azure AD and we actually add this permission, directory reader, let's see if we can find it. And the actual permission is actually, let's see here. The actual permission needed is to read applications, and this permission is granted by the directory reader's role in Azure AD. A normal user in Azure AD is granted this permission by default, but guests aren't, so guests won't be able to see anything. And let's see if we have to log in and log out again. So we're logging out, logging in, and we're running the discovery again, and hopefully it works. So in this case we can see that it picked up the cluster and the resource URL and the proxy URL. And today we're going to take a look at how we can do this without having the directory reader permission. So let's remove that permission again. Remove that permission from the user, and we should hopefully see that we're not able to do that anymore, at least when we've logged out. Takes perhaps a few more minutes for it to be removed. We'll check back in a while. The idea I'm having right now is that we're going to make it possible to run the discovery if it fails with the Azure AD applications, that we're going to look at the subscriptions. And in this case I've only granted reader access to one of the resource groups, and my hope is that by having read access to one resource group in one subscription, we should also be able to see the tags on this subscription. In this case I've created just a simple tag with a key foo and a value bar, and I've been able to verify that my user is able to read this tag. The idea here is that we're going to do, I'm not sure exactly what we're going to call it, but we're going to call it something and see if we can get to that as a second step if the first discovery doesn't work. Like this. So if we get that you don't have the privileges to perform the action, then we should take a look at are we able to discover it through are we able to discover this through the subscription tags instead, because that won't require you to have higher privileges in Azure AD, and that's hopefully a good thing as well. Let's see, it was a while back I worked on this. So the project is split into two binaries. We have the kubectl plugin that we're looking at right now, and we have the proxy. And hopefully we won't have to touch the proxy at all, and we only have to take a look at the actual CLI or the kubectl plugin. And I'm actually not 100% sure where we should begin, so we're just going to take a look at where it could be. My idea is that we most likely will need to take a look at the Discover client, and this Discover client is let's see what it does. So we create the login context, we choose the output type, we look enable Azure CLI token, let's see what that does. Alright, and we just return the client. Then we have the CLI flags that we generate, and then we have the actual discover command. And when we run the discover command, we run the client run, and we pass it some kind of configuration, and we create an authorizer, and this authorizer creates an application client, and we search we create a search filter for this tag, and the tag is azad-kube-proxy. We create the OData query, we run the list command, and my best guess is that we're going to see this issue either here at when we run list, or perhaps in a later stage. But let's begin with this and just see if unable to list Azure AD. So this is if we have the debug command enabled. So let's try to run debug and see what happens. Unable to list Azure AD applications. Base client get. Applications client base client get unexpected status 403. OData error, authorization request denied, insufficient privileges to complete the operation. Alright, so if we receive authorization request denied, insufficient privileges. So let's see if we can just take that and do something like if error not equal, let's just check out a new browser. Let's call it discovery subscription tags, something like that. And let's see here. Let's do something really simple. If error strings contains error. If it contains insufficient privileges, then foobar, just to test if that actually does anything. Let's remove the debug flag. Just see that we're seeing that is. Oh, we didn't see foobar. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see if this could have been somewhere else then. Unable to list Azure AD applications. Unable to list. Alright, so the error. Oh, data error, insufficient privileges. String substring. Perhaps we can do something like that. Let's check out the make file as well. Make. Alright, we should do build plugin. Make build plugin. Let's give it a few seconds to compile. And if we run it like this, yeah, we see foobar. Alright, so let's start there. Okay, so we know if we have an error and it contains this string, then we should do something else. Right. Let's. What should we do? Well, we should return discover data from here. So perhaps we should do something like, if this happens, we should do return. Let's do something like, what do we call? I'll call it client. Client try subscription discovery. And let's pause the context. Yeah, let's start with that. And that means that we will need to do the same thing as we do here. Try subscription discovery. Alright, so what would a subscription discovery look like? Well, we need to do a discovery of, let's see here. Yeah, we need to do a discovery of the subscription tags. So that would look something like, let's take a guess. Resource manager, let's say resource. Let's just scroll down to R, and there we go. We have resources, and we have ARM subscription. Perhaps it could be ARM subscription, but I would tag something. Let's go to T instead. See if there's an SDK for tags. Well, it doesn't exist. Could be something else then. I'm not sure what the actual what the actual endpoint is. So perhaps we need to find that out before we do anything else. If we do a set tag list, can we do that with verbose? Well, that didn't much. Let's do debug. Well, we got a lot of stuff here. Let's see what we actually did here. We did Microsoft resources tags default. Well, it feels like it should be in resources then. Perhaps I'm just missing it. Resources. Change feature locks ARM resources. Alright. And there we go. We have this one. That's awesome. So let's try to use this. So we do something like that, and then we can do we need to import the AC identity as well, but let's do that in a bit. So let's just do AC identity, and after that we do create the client, and we may need the subscription ID for that. So let's inject the subscription ID. Perhaps we can reuse the authentication. Let's see what happens. Subscription ID string, and let's see here. So we have a string there. Do we have the environment? So we don't have the client. Does the client have the subscription ID or not? Tenant ID. Alright, that's not awesome. We need to figure out what the actual subscription is. Perhaps we should start with just hard coding that to begin with. Yeah, let's do that. So in this case we know that our subscription ID is this one. Like that. And then we can take the subscription ID. Let's see here. So let's save that and make tidy. Let's download everything. All right. So we're not checking the errors. Let's do that. If error nil. And let's do the same here, but let's call that tag client instead. And tag client dot, which one could it be? Get by ID. Well, yeah, let's try that. Context, and we'll do subscriptions, and just pause the subscription ID. API version. Which one did we use here? Let's sheet and use the same one. API version. Let's do an empty one there. And what kind of response do we get? We get a response and an error. And response should contain tags, right? And perhaps we should just make sure that we're returning like that, and what are the tags? Yeah, we have something like that. For tag in range res.tags. If tag not equal nil, let's say if tag equals nil, then we'll just do continue because it's a pointer, and then we'll do print f found a tag, and that should be tags should be value, a key, and value. If value is not, let's do something like that. Key value, and we'll do new line there as well, and let's dereference the value. Alright, so I have no idea if this is going to work, but let's just see what happens. Build the plugin, give it a few seconds, discover. Alright, so we're finding the foobar tag. That's really good. What does the get discover data do? Discover data, it loops through everything, finds the cluster name, the proxy URL, and we have to do something like this as well. We need to populate the discovery data with a discovery object. Alright, so in this case we need to find the cluster name, the resource, and the proxy URL. That shouldn't be a problem for us. And this data should, alright, that's good. So can we create a tag in the subscription? Let's try this. Let's remove the old one and create. Let's create it like that, and then we have cluster name, resource, source, and then we have the proxy URL, Let's just remove all the white spaces from here, and let's see what we can find. Alright, so the cluster name would be AKS Dev West Europe. The resource would be something like AKS West Europe.dev.senate.io, and the proxy URL would be the same. Let's just store that somewhere if it doesn't work, and apply. Can we store? Yeah, we could. That's awesome. So if we do make build plugin and run it, so we're still just finding foobar. I wonder how long it takes for a tag to be created. Or oh, all right, we found it. So that's really good. So perhaps we should just do something like we need to figure out, let's just do one to begin with, and then we have to figure out how. So the default use case we have is that we are seeing, when we do this, we want to do discovery, and we want to use the current subscription if possible, and we want to find all clusters there. So perhaps we should do something like, perhaps we should do this, create an array of this. So instead of calling it this way, let's say we have 3 of them. So let's say format, let's make it JSON, and format document. Alright, so we have first one, second one, third one. We have QA, prod. Or perhaps we should do it another way. Yeah, we should have multiple tags instead. So we should have one tag for each, and it could be QA, prod. That way we won't be hitting, I'm not sure what the actual limits are. Let's see, Azure tag length limit. Sorry for the flashbang. A tag can have a maximum of 512 characters. Alright. Let's see what we can do with that. So perhaps we should call it, do something like that. We have the dev cluster, we have the QA cluster, and we have the prod cluster. And we store it like this. This means that we will, if we create these tags on each of the subscriptions that we use, at least we will have a, you don't have to change subscription to discover this data. Alright, so that's good. So the next step would be to do something like this. So if value is nil, continue. If strings dot has prefix key azad-kube-proxy, something like that. If it doesn't have that prefix, skip it, continue. If it has that prefix, then perhaps we should do clusters as an empty discover, an empty slice of discover objects. Yeah. And if we find it, then we should do something like, we should try to create it. So we have the cluster as discover, like that, and we do JSON.unmarshal, and we unmarshal the value to the cluster. And we need to do that to byte array, like that. If error not equals nil, return nil error. And if we then find it, and perhaps we should do some kind of validation. Let's see, if cluster dot cluster name equals empty, or cluster dot proxy rel is empty, or cluster dot resource is empty, then return nil. Then we should say something like all fields of the cluster not found. Yeah, let's do that. And if we have everything, then we do clusters equals append clusters cluster. And then we should just, if the length of the clusters is 0, then return nil. No clusters found on subscription. Yeah, let's do that. And if it works, then we should do something like return clusters nil. All right, let's try that. And perhaps then we can do the menu as well, just to see that it works. Oh. Yeah, we need to configure the menu as well. So we have the discovery. How does the menu work? The menu works discovery client run, unable to run discovery. I'm not sure. So new discovery client, and a new discovery client should use this. So why are we only seeing one of them? That's weird. Oh, we see all of them. That's great. That's really good. All right, so we are now able to do that. And now the last question is, how do we figure out the subscription? But perhaps that's for another day. I've come so far that we're able to discover it based on the subscription, and I'm quite fine with that for today. And yeah, I think that's it for today. And thank you for watching, and if you came this far, and have a great day. Bye.